Hey everyone, so I thought we'd start out today by doing a small rolling ball tutorial together to just get used to Unity's 3D workflow. And so we'll start out by creating a brand new 3D project in Unity here from Unity Hub. I'm just going to call this demo, and we'll have Unity create that for us here. Now Unity will create a very simple package for us that has just a couple of things in the scene that we need to work with, like a light and a camera, and the rest will be just open to us to be able to add whatever else we would like. So let's start out by adding a couple of 3D game objects to our scene. We'll add a ground, we'll add a ball, we'll change the materials around so that way we can give these things unique colors, and we'll change the name so that we have something clear to refer to in our scripts. So I'm going to create a new 3D game object by clicking on this plus icon and hitting 3D object. Let's create a plane. And we want to make sure that this position is zeroed out, and if for some reason it's not on all three of these axes, just go up to the little ellipses here in the top right corner and choose to reset that. It's important because that 0, 0, 0 is sort of the center part of our world, and it'll make things easier for us to find as we move forward. Let's rename this plane by double clicking on it slowly and calling it ground. And then let's add a sphere game object to the scene, and we'll use that as our player ball object. So once again, hitting the plus icon, 3D object, in this case we're going to choose sphere. Mine is zeroed out, which is great, but we can see if we zoom in here that we want to just make sure that this is resting on the surface of our plane. By default, it's using the center point as a way of positioning it in space. So at 0, 0, 0 here, it's intersecting. The default size for this sphere is 1 by 1 by 1. So I know that if I want to move it upward along the y-axis in this space and have it resting, I can type in 0.5, and that will bring me right to the surface. Now, I can zoom in and center this in the frame in a couple of ways. I'm going to do this by just double clicking on sphere here. What's nice about this is that once I do this and it's selected, I can hold down the Alt key and use my left mouse to drag around this game object in space. It's helpful if we're looking at something a little more interesting than a sphere to be able to move it around. Now I'm going to rename this as well. Let's call this one ball. And let's zoom out a little bit to take a look at both of these things in the space. The other things that were added, as I mentioned at the beginning, are a camera, which allows us to view this world, right? We can zoom out here and we can see our camera here facing toward our player. And then here in my game view, I can see exactly what that camera sees. So as I move it around, right, that's updated as well. I have a directional light. You'll notice everything has kind of a slightly yellowish tint to it here in my scene, and that's because the directional light by default is not set to a pure white, but rather this sort of creamy color. So I can select that light and click on it just like this and move this over to any color, but in this case, to be able to make it a pure white, we can see that the colors are actually represented as like a light gray again, which is pretty commonly used in a game development environment like this. Another thing about our directional light, I often find that this is just like in the worst possible space. Directional lights don't really care what they are positioned relative to the other game objects in your scene. You can see as I'm dragging this around, it's not affecting these game objects at all. The shadows are still as intense as they are. The highlights look just the same. It doesn't matter where they are. So often what I'll do is I'll just move this a little bit further up. What does matter with a directional light is the direction that it's facing, and you can see the direction that the light is facing here by seeing the rays that are being represented with these short yellow lines. And we can rotate this game object if we want to make some changes to this. I could choose a specific axis, and you can see I can start to affect it this way. and make changes like this. We'll do a lot with lighting here as the semester continues. For right now, I just want to also point out that we can also adjust the strength of the shadows here. I'm going to take these real-time shadows and drop the strength from 1, which is our full strength, down to something a little more pleasant. Here, let's do like a 0.281. That looks great. And we'll use that in this scene just to be a little less severe. Now, we're going to make some additional changes here in our scene. We're going to add a material to distinguish the ground from the ball. We're going to do that by creating a little bit of organization down in our assets folder. So I've opened this in the project pane, and I'm going to right click on it to create a brand new empty folder that I'm going to just refer to as materials. So we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here and get things set up. I'm going to open up materials, and from within here I'm going to go ahead and create a material that I'm going to use to give the ball a color. And so I'm going to right click on this, choose create, and about 1/3 of the way down choose material. Let's call this ball, just so it's easy for us to remember what this is going to be used for. And then in the inspector, we can see that we're using Unity's standard shader. We have a number of different shaders that we can use that we'll talk about throughout the semester, and a lot of ways that we can go and affect the way that this changes the appearance of our 3D game object in the scene. For today, we're really only going to be concerned with just the top part of this here. The albedo is going to allow us to choose a color for this. So maybe for my ball, I'm going to choose kind of like a nice golden color like this. And the smoothness. Now, the smoothness, the further I move to the left, will make like a more matte appearance to the finish of our game object. You can see how it's becoming nice and soft and diffuse. And as I move it over to the right, it becomes a glossy sort of slick surface. So I'm going to pull it over here just a little bit, and you can see there's some nice reflections happening, and I'm happy with this. And now to apply this, I'm going to take this material down here from the project pane and just drag it onto the game object I want to use it on. See, there it goes. What this is doing is it's setting this first element inside of our mesh renderer component to say this is the material that's being applied to this game object. We can override this and set it to something else by clicking on the target, or later by just going and creating a new material down here in our project folder and dragging it back onto this game object as well. So let's create another material that we'll use to set the material for our ground. So once again, right click, we'll hit create. We're going to go about 1/3 of the way down, create a material, and this one we'll call ground. And this one, let's go ahead and make this some sort of color, like maybe like some sort of like greenish color. And what we'll do is we'll also make this like a nice like matte finish. We'll drag this all the way back down to 0. Now we'll drag this over onto our ground. And you can see now these two sets of materials are placed where they need to go. They match up to what we have down here in our assets folder as well.